What is up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the InkCast. My name is Brad, otherwise known as Bradford, and I'm joined, as always, by default Dan and Prashan. Say hello, guys.
What's
Hello,
up,
guys.
guys?
So we have a fun episode in store for everyone today. We're going to be looking at three main topics with some subcategories we'll get to in a moment. But the first thing is set championships. We all competed in one this past weekend, as well as one in the prior weekend. So we can talk about our experience with those and maybe some future ones as well. DLC Texas just wrapped up with a new winner. If this is the third DLC, right? So definitely going to take a look at the meta, how everything's going with that. Is Bucky leaving going to be incredibly impactful? How's that going to shake out the meta? All that good stuff. And of course, we have Shimmering Skies, the new set to look at as far as spoilers go, and some of our favorites that we've chosen here today. And maybe even a card that's from set 6, but we'll get to that in a moment. So first things first is set championships. Do you want to talk about the one we did this weekend or the one prior?
Oh man, so I think when it comes to it, like let's talk about set championships just as a whole. So I know I competed in 3. I think Brad and Prashan, you guys were in 2 of them. So yeah, let's just talk about them as a whole, and then we'll get into last weekend specifically. But last time when we did our Stitch one, I know myself and Brad, we got to do one for Stitch because it was just the 2 weekends. Rashawn unfortunately wasn't able to do any of them during the Stitch, but then with Ursula, since it was all month long, there was plenty to get in there, and I'm curious to kind of start with that. What do you guys think when it comes to having it all month long compared to just kind of 2 weekends? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What are your thoughts around just the fact that the full month of these things?
I think it's a good thing. I think it gives everyone an opportunity or a chance to try to win these tournaments. But I think the downside is like the meta. Everyone's like grinding out and trying to win multiple Ursulas. So like a few times, like I'm playing in the tournament and someone puts down their like set championship mat, and you're like, come on, like really, you need another one of these? So it's good and bad.
How about you, Brad?
No, I mean, I think it's good. The thing with the set championship mat is funny. You know what's actually really funny, Prashan? When you mentioned that, because you were right next to me when that guy sat down with the set championship mat. But remember, he bought it. He didn't win it. He bought
He
it.
bought it?
Yeah.
I thought he won it like the weekend prior.
No, the guy bought it. There's 2 people there that said they bought their own mats.
Oh, okay.
And one of them said purposely, he's like, "Yeah, I wanted to get in people's heads saying, oh, I've already won one." And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, you're at table 18, so
Oh,
that's
yeah, true.
really working well for you. But no, I mean,
Yeah.
otherwise, it's fine. Like the grinders are gonna grind.
Um,
You see other people like content creators within our community, especially like Kawa, things like that, that are saying, "Hey, look how many mats I can win, how many Ursulas I can win." Like, there's a bragging right to that. So yes, it kind of sucks because it's like some people might feel like, oh, I'm not going to be able to win or get my map because I'm going against someone that already has 2 or whatever.
Yeah.
But like sometimes in a competitive scene, you have to beat the best to be the best kind of thing. So I don't know. I think it's mostly fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I kind of experienced too. Like the very first one I played in, I got to top 8, and of course got knocked out by the one guy who had actually beat me earlier in Swiss. Second one, we kind of bubbled out, couldn't make it into top 8, and then this one, of course, did fairly well, which we'll get into that in a minute of what we played, how we did, and stuff. But yeah, this past weekend, I sat down and several of the people are like, yeah, I've already won 2 Ursulas or whatever, and most of them that we saw didn't necessarily have mats. I think there was 1 or 2 mats floating around, like you mentioned, but definitely a lot of people, because we are in kind of weekend 3 of getting an Ursula. There was a lot of people that already had them. They were playing 2 events a weekend and things like that. So definitely, I think it's a good thing, like you guys are mentioning, being able to play, especially if you're busy. Maybe you can only pick 1 or 2 days for the entire month that you can play. There's definitely those grinders that have played 15, not necessarily 15 events, but there's definitely people that have been playing like 5 or 6.
They've played. I mean, there were people that said like there was like a bunch going around the area the day before, and like
Yeah.
they were like, yeah, I played one yesterday on I just won the one yesterday, and now I'm here, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just part of the game. It's part of any TCG where there's that grinding aspect. So it's a give and take.
Yeah. So kind of going into what did we play? So after this, we want to talk about some of the spicy stuff we saw, but I want to start just with kind of what did we play? How do we feel about what we played? Would we have changed maybe what we played? Whether that was, this past week's or before. And I'll start off since I'm kind of the villain in the room that we were joking about at the event. I played Bucky. So I didn't really go too hard on the different decks on the first two. Definitely tried to win at Ursula, but going into this one being my final one, because I'm not going to be playing this upcoming weekend, I was like, hey, I gotta just pull out Bucky. Got to do the deck that really is one of the best decks in the format. I played Bucky, did well, got a second place, so I did win my Ursula and my Matt at this one. But overall, like, a lot of people hate Bucky. I had a lot of people that were very upset with me playing Bucky, and you could see it in the frustration. But sometimes you have to just play the meta if you want to win the card,
Just if you're gonna get upset, be upset with the Ravensburger for not flat out banning the card or
Sure.
making the errata official immediately instead of waiting for the next set to come out.
Yeah.
Like,
True.
I will fault no one for playing whatever the best thing is in metagaming the metagame, just because, like, hey, you announced an errata, it's not in effect for another couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Go get your wins. Like, who
Yeah,
cares?
but how do you feel about like certain people just buying the best cards and not knowing how to play them? Because I did notice like at a table next to me,
Yeah.
the guy had the Bucky deck, but he really didn't know how to play it.
Yeah.
He still won, but
I think that's kind of the problem. When it comes to net decking and with any game, right? We all come from Marvel Snap. We've all played other games, whether that's Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, things like that in the past. You can always net deck a deck, and usually the best decks in the format. Well, I won't say the best decks. The top performing decks in the format, because of the sheer numbers, mean that they're easier to play. So I'm going to caveat that with the fact that like the best deck may be very difficult to play, but when you look at events where 50% of the top 64 is the Bucky deck, it means it should be fairly easy to play because half the people making it, so 32 out of the 64 or whatever, are playing the deck well. So it should be a fairly easy deck to play. And I think when
I
it
think that
comes,
was like something that was talked about was conversion rates
yeah,
on decks.
and it's got one of the highest ones when it comes to Bucky, and I think it's because it's pretty easy. Turn one, you either play Diablo or Robin Hood. Turn two, you play Bucky. Turn three, you shift, or you turn two, shift to Diablo, whatever. Like, it's got a pretty linear path. And again, I'm not saying it's the easiest deck in the world to pilot, and if you just picked it up, you'd make the finals. But it is one of those that like the choices are minimal unless you just have a really bad hand. Then the choices can be complex. But like, as long as you have Bucky on two and you have some type of Floodborn on three, it's a pretty easy, straightforward deck to kind of maneuver around in.
I took in brooms and it didn't work out too well for me. I played against Brad in the first round, which sucks. We all try to avoid each other, but going into that, but I believe I won my second match pretty easily. I think I'm still a player where like I win the games that I'm supposed to, but like the grinders and the more advanced players, I'm gonna have a tough time against because they've been playing the game a little bit longer than I have. But overall, I feel better. Maybe next set I will probably be more confident going in. I feel my confidence going up, like tournament by tournament. And then like the funny thing is too is like people are asking me how long have I been playing. I'm like a few months. They're like, oh okay, like they're actually surprised. So I'm like, all right,
Yeah,
but I think I'm getting better.
absolutely. And the biggest thing, like we were saying before, I mean, yes, you can net deck and grab a deck, but realistically, at these types of tournaments, the more you play a deck, the better you're going to be with a deck. And so I know, like with brooms, it's a deck you've been kind of messing around with. We played earlier in the week over Discord just to kind of get some reps and games in, so you can feel a little more confident in it. But like realistically, you only played the deck a couple times before going in, and you played it fairly well. So if once you find that deck, and I know that's kind of been the issue without having Pixelborn and things like that, it becomes a little bit harder to be like, I want to grind 10 games a day with a deck. It's much harder to find those matches now, since you have to queue up, and technically we have the new Pixelborn, we have Discord, but it's
Right.
it's
And it
harder
also
and
depends
longer.
on the level of competition too. It's
Mhm.
like we could play against like our friends sometimes or people that just start out, but it's not the same feel or the same like threat as it
Yeah,
is actually like performing in a tournament setting.
yeah,
Because it's like, all right, like I know what I could do against this person, but like when you're in that tournament setting, like I didn't see a Bucky deck at all, and I was prepared to see Bucky all day, and it was the complete opposite from Orlando. Orlando was nothing but Bucky, Bucky, Bucky.
yeah,
In this tournament, it was like everyone was just doing whatever they could just to get their lore and win.
yeah, yeah. We definitely see a lot of off the wall decks, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Brad, you took in, so last weekend I convinced you to do red purple. You
Yep.
were on the fence on a couple different decks. I was like, look, red purple, it's win all the tournaments. It's fairly easy to play. Take that in, get your Ursula. Didn't shake out because we saw, like Prashant said, in Orlando, the Kiss Me area, we saw so many Bucky decks. Like half the
Four.
people or more
I played
played Bucky.
4 in a row. Round 1, I played against Brooms, and then rounds 2 through 5, I played against Bucky. And I was like, this is just not fun.
Yeah.
And Red Purple had seemingly, were supposed to have a decent matchup against Bucky, like we talked about before. But when my opponents just constantly have 2 or 3 Diablos on the board at any given time,
Yeah.
and they're drawing 3 cards during my draw step every turn, um, yeah, that's not very fun.
Yeah.
I am going to shout from the rooftops as much as I can that I think Diablo is the real problem, not Bucky. Now,
Yeah.
Bucky should have been changed or potentially banned like they did. I would rather Bucky just been banned outright. We've already gone over that. But I think Diablo is a little bit more egregious of a card that people are just not going to realize or start to realize soon.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. So this weekend though, you wanted to go a different route and you went with some red blue. So how did it feel? Do you feel like you should have run red purple with what the room looked like after the fact?
I mean, so we'll talk about spicy decks in a moment. I played back to back in the last 2 rounds. I played back to back location centric decks, right? That were both playing what's his name from Treasure Planet that gives you a free location.
Yeah.
So that really sucks when I'm only running 3 Maui, 2 Hercules. I have 5 total cards in my deck that can really effectively deal with locations. And even then, RLS has 8 toughness.
Yeah.
So that's not great. But besides that, besides the location stuff, I think the rest of the field was like, I don't know. I think it was fine. I think the deck performed well enough. There were times I didn't draw as well as I would like to.
Mm-hmm.
I drew all 4 copies of my Fishbone Quill in game 3 of a match that I was on the play. That's unfortunate. The mirror I played round 2, and that was not fun in the slightest because unlike Magic or other control games in like TCGs, usually you can have some interaction back and forth, but when it comes to this, it was not doing that at all. But no, overall I like the deck. I think it was good, a good deck. I would make some tweaks here and there, but for the most part, I didn't think I don't regret the choice.
Yeah.
I just ran into some really awkward matchups and didn't draw particularly well for a few games.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like Brad mentioned, we'll cut over to this screen. We had some real spicy decks coming through, and it was fun to see that. And I think that this comes down to, again, being one of the last 2 weekends. People may have already tried to go with their red purple. They may have already tried to go with Bucky. They either won their Ursulas or they haven't, and they're just like, you know what? I'm just going to play what I want to play. I want to play something different. I want to try to catch people off guard. I mean, Prashant, you played Brooms instead of like a red purple or amethyst steel that you played the weekend before. We saw the first deck, and Brad, you went against this one. This is the location one you were talking about, and this is a fun one because just to kind of throw it out, guys, like this is $100 deck that had just won the championship the night before, the day before, at a different store. And we're actually going to be talking to these guys hopefully later this week or next week, getting some games in with the deck to show it off with the deck tech and everything. But Brad, like, how did this one feel? Because it looks spicy, and it's got some old cards we haven't seen in a good while.
Yeah, so this is Erica's list. Her and her husband both came to the set championship, and she was rocking an Ursula mat, champion mat, saying that she just won with this exact list the day before, like you mentioned. It's a deck that she and her husband built together. And her husband was also playing something spicy. I forget what it was, but he was also like on like a homebrew thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the deck played really well. Curse Merfolk is a card that people need to be reminded is very, very good. That's going to immediately go right back into the discard list. They're going to be dropping Bucky. Of course, Flynn's still good. You have a great early game. You have the great Flynn into Sisu a little bit, and then you have all these other evasive cards. You have Minnie Mouse. You have Tinkerbell. You have Cheshire Cat, which is kind of pseudo-evasive. And then, of course, you got Prince Eric, who's another pseudo-evasive. Like, okay, you want to attack this and challenge it, well, you're going to lose something in the process. And then a card that we have been wondering if people would start playing again is Cusco. Mm-hmm. And she said that Cusco won her 3 games yesterday, including the last game that won her the set championship. So she stands by Cusco being insane. And then, of course, Jim to drop your Fang and your RLS Legacy, just having that location. On control, my biggest problem with the deck was I was able to kind of pick apart the early game a little bit. Yeah. But she was able to generate a decent amount of lore off of the aggressive starts. You know, I could brawl a Curse Merfolk or whatever, but then by the time when I do that, she's already gained a couple of lore off of that. A Flynn stuck the board. She's got another Flynn going into Cease or whatever. And then by the time I get to be prepared, well, she's already dropped a gym and she has 2 locations down. And I'm sitting there staring at just another refill for the board. Like it was just very fast. It was very hard to deal with. Put me in a lot of awkward places, especially that Prince Eric. It is a really cool list. I will say, if you have Bucky's, if you own Bucky, like again, we talk about this being $100 deck. That's a great budget option. Mm-hmm. I would say, in the grand scheme of things. If you already own a place at a Bucky's, slot them in. I would probably cut the Cheshire Cat and maybe trim on Minnie Mouse or trim on like Ursula. Like you'd find some ways to cut it down a little bit. But if this is a deck that would love to run Bucky, you don't need to run. I'm sorry, not Bucky, Diablo. Yeah. Diablo. I apologize. If you you don't need to run the 1-drop at all. You don't need to do the shift thing. I think just having a good Diablo in the deck, because he is also evasive. This deck wants a bunch of evasive stuff. And then also, you know, putting it on Fang or things like that, giving it ward. Yeah, this is a really cool deck. I would love to see more of it.
Yeah, and it's got a lot, like you mentioned, it's got a lot of evasive here. And we already realized, like, with Diablo, the reason he's so good is, I mean, you have to have the answer for him. And if you don't, you lose. And I know when I was playing with the Bucky list, I went against all 3 of my rounds were against Ruby, Amber decks, all first 3, and then I AD'd on 4 and 5. But that super goof, he's evasive. And if you don't remember he's evasive, he will sneakily take out all of your Diablos. So there's Tinkerbell to also give something else evasive. And I love the Prince Eric because I saw it in another deck too, where once it came down, you're just like, okay, well, I can't run into that, and I can't leave something tapped for it to run into, because then he can kill my Diablo, or he can kill my beast, or just something that's of value on the boards. It's one of those cards where he started in a lot of decks when he was first released with Teeth and Ambitions, and then everybody kind of was like, oh, he's a little slow. Turn 4 and then turn 5, you're trying to kill him. That's too slow for stuff. But in these style decks, tapping for 2 lore, creating this like problem card on the board, right? Like, if you want a Medusa, I'm going to take out something else if you kill him. Like, it opens up a lot of doors. So I definitely like this list as well.
Quick correction, by the way. Goofy Super Goof does not have evasive. He just has rush.
Oh, it's rush? Okay.
Just
so
rush.
It must have
He's
been a
flying. He's flying, so he makes you think he has evasive. The Tinkerbell has evasive though.
Yeah,
The
and
4-drop
Tinkerbell
Tink.
can give someone
And
evasive.
he gives something else evasive, yeah.
I have to look. Oh, never mind. I was thinking of the other Goofy. Sorry, the one that has like the parachute.
The 5-drop.
Yeah, he's evasive. Yeah, my fault. That's
yeah, stop making flying Goofies or drawing Goofies that are flying. But yeah, like Fang
that
is
Goofy
cool looking and
like
stuff.
whenever he challenges, like
Yeah,
he
you
does
get the
gain
lore.
2 lore.
Yeah. Yeah, this deck can have some explosive starts. There's some cards in here that like they said that they would like want to be different. Like the 2 copies of the 1-drop mini. They just said they couldn't find any other 1-drops they wanted to run.
Yeah.
I suppose if you wanted to, you wanted to run Diablo, you could cut those, run 2 copies of the 1-drop Diablo that shows the opponent's hand, and then get your place of the Diablo in there, just so you have the ability to shift onto something later.
Well, you couldn't in the deck because you don't have a discarded action. But
that's right.
But I still think Diablo may be the card there, unless you're using mini for something particular, like you're wanting to take out. Because it doesn't really matter. Because most of the things you would take out are probably only 1 power. Yeah, like I think the 2 Diablos in there just to hand check. Because I found that very helpful with the Bucky deck, being able to see on turn 1, like, what are you doing? Oh, you've got a removal spell for my Diablo. Oh, you've got this. I need to play around that. Or knowing on turn 2, do I need to play this Ursula or do I need to play Flynn, right? In this particular deck, I think it would be a really good thing to know what's in their hand.
One last thing I want to bring up about the deck is the Jim Hawkins angle with Fang and ROS. Only 6 locations, because ROS is uninkable. So you could bump it up to a full playset, but I could definitely see like, hey, you run into some issues there. I wonder. We've seen this before in other games. Marvel Snap is one. Magic, we've seen other stuff, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Especially, we've seen this a lot. Is little engines or like little just plug and play things for your game plan. Where Marvel Snap, it's like the Hood, Sentry, Annihilus package, or in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's you're running a ritual deck, and you have there's these specific ritual monsters, or not cards that care about ritual stuff that you can kind of slot in as little engine and packages, et cetera, et cetera. Jim Hawkins with just 6 total locations very well just could be an engine you can slot into different decks.
Well,
like
I'm
like the Flynn and Sisu.
Yeah, and I'm gonna pause you on that one because I do want to jump to the deck that I saw, which was specifically gym and locations. It was a Ruby Amber deck, and I agree with you 100% on that, because we saw the same thing with RLS and gym, but because they were in Amber, they got to throw in 1 more card, which was just in time. So if you think like a turn 4 gym with a free RLS and move them on there is pretty rough. Doing that on turn 3 surprised me in one of my games. Like, I got game 1, and then game 2, he was on the play. So literally after my turn 2, he just in time plays Jim, which plays RLS, which moves Jim there, and that gives him evasive. So like, again, now he's got to answer to Diablo on turn 3. Just all kinds of stuff. And this deck had that synergy in that engine, because once RLS comes down, like you mentioned, it's 8 health. And against a Bucky deck, I was having to swing everything into it, opening up, something dying from a Maui or something coming down. And a lot of decks, like, unless you're playing the red decks realistically, or you have Rise of the Titans or something like that, like, it's going to take at least 2 turns. Like, you think Castle's really good because you also get the card draw if you move something, but like, realistically, Castle wins you the games because it's getting 2 lore every turn, and it gets you 4 to 6 lore, and RLS does the exact same thing.
Yeah, I also played against this deck. This was my last round that I played against. And it was another one that was rough when I only have 5 answers to infinitely more locations this time around. So yeah, this was really cool to see. It was definitely a good looking deck. Again, Flynn Sisu. It has the Queen of Hearts angle of just like the attacking stuff to draw, which I think is interesting as well. But hey, Just in Time is a card again that we talked about before, kind of like Cusco, of like, this is a good card, right? Why is this not seeing play? So I think I'm hoping when we talk about this Bucky change, it kind of opens up the meta for people to kind of try out stuff again. I don't know. It might just devolve into ruby amethyst everywhere. But hey, I can dream.
Exactly. So this deck I actually faced earlier in the rounds. I believe they made top 8, and then they may have got knocked out the first round of top 8. But really strong deck. It's that Mufasa style build deck. Again, no Mufasa in here, but you could definitely slot it into here. You could change up some of these cards and things like that. But the power of Rapunzel and the healing that's down there, all the different cards you have, and those locations are hard to remove. It just has that. The only card, and again, I don't know if this is the exact list, but it was very similar of what I saw on the board. But having these cards be able to move around all these locations are really, really good. And Prashant, you saw a spicy deck, and then I saw them in the top 4. But that deck actually showed up in Texas and placed pretty well on Texas. But it is the Under the Sea deck, and I'm curious for you, did they get you with a combo? What cards were really annoying on your side?
I think it was like the combination of like the discard, and does this one have like Simba too, right? The bodyguard.
This one, well, this list doesn't. I just again grabbed this list on there, but I saw the same one that also had Simba protecting
So
some
it
of
had
his
like
guys.
Simba with the bodyguard, so you had to go out after the Simba. It was just like tough, like what the bare necessities.
Yeah.
Like it definitely took me off guard. And then like luckily I was like playing Broom, so like whenever they played like Under the Sea, I just like shuffled everything up again. But it wasn't enough. Like I like unfortunately I couldn't get my locations
Yeah.
at all during my games. But
And
like they were just like steamrolling me. And I had no clue what was going on. I was expecting like Bucky everywhere. So I was like, all right, what is this deck? Like I have no clue what this is.
Yeah.
Like my first game, they steamrolled me. Second game was like a little bit closer, but I still couldn't figure them out.
Yeah.
the
And
thing I love about this list though is the
mm,
Kita uh
yeah.
that just being able to do Kita with Under the Sea
Yeah.
is really fun.
Yeah. So if you guys don't really know what the combo is, essentially Under the Sea is a sing together song for 8. And it will take all your opposing characters on the board that are 2 or below and shuffle them onto the bottom of their deck. So essentially, it's a one-sided board wipe that can be sung by multiple characters. And in the meantime, they're leveraging the muses. And I know, Brad, this was a card that when it got spoiled, you were like, this card looks really good. And it didn't, like, it popped up every now and then with some of the Bucky stuff, but then just kind of disappeared. Well, the way the muses work is every time you sing a song or you play a song, you can bounce a character back to their hand. So what you're kind of doing through this whole process is you're bouncing stuff back to their hand to slow them down. And then towards the end, you either play your big Kita, which gives everything -4. So literally your Under the Sea is going to wipe everybody out. Or you can do the paint the town red, and you can, or paint the roses red, where you can also just single target stuff to minus them. So similar to like an ice block to be able to do that. So you kind of just build board presence, continue to bounce their stuff away, even with, we don't talk about Bruno, and then eventually just board wipe them and kind of out tempo them. But yeah, it works really well. And with Diablo, again, that card just being so strong, they're drawing cards, they're doing stuff this whole time while they're just outpacing. And he did make top 4. I played against it, and I got lucky because they never got to cast Under the Sea. I either snagged it with my Ursula, or Bucky was going. And so like I think game 2, I was stressed the whole time because he had 2 muses out and he kept bouncing my stuff. But I was able to just kind of put a lot of pressure. and he just could never find his Under the Sea. So
Yeah, this could be a one of the decks moving forward. Like you might see a branch off of you know what green deck you're going to be running now that Bucky is going to be not really a thing anymore.
yeah.
So Diablo's still very strong. You're going to want to run that card. Now, do you still go with like the more mid-rangey approach with Steel, with like Beast and Robin Hood and stuff like that, or do you go with this more combo-y kind of feel with Under the Sea, Kita, and all these different songs? I really like this version a lot, and I'm very interested actually in playing it maybe for the next season, depending on what we get for additions to the deck.
Yeah. And just to kind of point out, this deck did make top 8 in Dallas. So this is a deck that's viable. This was the first time we'd really seen the deck. Again, it's a deck that's been talked about for a long time of like, man, check out the combo with Kidda and Under the Sea, but like nobody had really put the deck together. But we saw it in top 8 of the event. I don't know if that's what caused this particular player to be like, hey, I'm going to take that list and play it. When we saw him, essentially the following day while the top 64 was playing. But it ended up being really, really good.
Yeah, I think he was my third match.
Mm-hmm.
He was my third match. I was like, gosh, why am I playing all these tough people? Like, it was crazy.
Yeah, and so like I mentioned, we did get the Ursula and we got the playmat for the InkCast. So we have that and we have the Stitch and
Did
the
you open
playmat there.
already?
I haven't opened the pack, so I'm about to start recording some shorts with the packs, and hopefully we'll have those going in the next week or two. So I've got, I don't know, like 15 packs or so to open total, but that was the prizes for the event. Luckily, because at first they said there was no prize support, which was ridiculous. One of the guys who made top 8 made a huge deal about it, and he found the writing on one of the events somewhere that said that there would be packs based on how many people played. So luckily, a big shout out to that guy who helped us get something more.
That was an interesting experience that entire day anyway.
Yeah.
Saying that the event was supposed to start at noon, but the store doesn't open until noon. So they refused to open the doors until they said that the store officially opened at noon, which that alone is crazy to me. Anytime there's been an event that's supposed to start when store hours typically start, they'll open the doors a little earlier because they're already there.
Yeah.
Payroll's already paying for them to be there for the by the hour. I've worked in retail for over a decade of my life in sales and various different companies as a manager and stuff like that. So like I get how that works. You can just open up you can just let people come in. And then on top of that,
very by the book.
Yeah, and then they're like, well, also, if this goes on to 7, we close at 7, y'all got to get out right at 7. Doesn't matter where we are in the tournament. And it's like that and then yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah.
It was it was interesting.
Well, and it was funny because we ended up going past 7 for the final match, and what they ended up doing was she literally closed the register at 7. So when we got our, like, after they had worked out, well, they had worked out this whole like how we were getting our prize support and stuff, and it was essentially store credit on a piece of paper, and they gave that out right before the finals. And she was like, and by the way, I'm closing the register in 20 minutes or something like that. She's like, so if you want to buy anything, I was like, well, and I talked to my opponent, I was like, I think we need to go cash these in because by the time we finish, she's gonna have the register closed. So we went and got our packs and everything, and then sat down and played the final match. But so she let us play, but literally as soon as we finished, she was like, "Okay, everybody out, y'all go. We're gonna lock up." And then there was some people sitting around that weren't playing, and she was like trying to shoo them out as we were having our match, because I think they were there for like D&D or something. But yeah, it was very strange and awkward, and I just felt like I've played Magic for a long time, and I've played in the stores since like the mid 2000s, or even like the late 2000s playing. And like every store that I've ever known, like they're fine to stay open at like 2 a.m. to do pre-releases and stuff. Like
it makes them money.
Yeah, they know what's going on.
It's like a chain or like I don't know.
Well, they are the one we go to is a chain, but like
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it was just I know for a fact the person that was working there is not a big like running of tournaments person.
Yeah.
In fact, there was someone that used to work there that stopped in to say hello. He was the one that ran all the tournaments.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's just it's whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And speaking
yeah,
of tournaments, kind of our segue here, we mentioned it a little bit, but Texas happened over the weekend. We have our top 64. We briefly mentioned it, but essentially, like half of the meta of top 64 was Bucky. I didn't actually pull the exact numbers. I'll do that in a later video as we talk about kind of the shifting of what we're going to see in set 5. But essentially, we had so many Bucky decks running around, but we had Ruby Amethyst really taking it out. And as you can see, like Ruby Amethyst, there was a one in top, there was essentially two in top 16 because you had first place in 16. And there wasn't many. There wasn't many. They were down further down in the top 64, the top 32, just a lot of Bucky, and then of course some returning colors of Steel Song coming back. So we had two Steel Songs in the top 4. So
yeah, and the difference between these two lists of the Steel Song ones are interesting. You have one list running Perdita as a
mhm,
two of, and very just like character song. That's it, just characters and songs. The other version was running Sleepy Flute,
mhm,
the one that got
second
second
place.
place.
Yeah, yeah.
So some differences here. Also, we see Golden Harp in one of the top 8 lists. I think we also see it in the other one. We double check. No, no Golden Harp in that one. So,
Mhm,
but they are running Baloo.
yeah. Blues.
Actually, they're just running a bunch of. Also, they're running a 4 of Lawrence.
Mhm. Yeah, I've seen a lot of
Wow,
Lawrence's popping up specifically for Flynn. So Lawrence helps you get out of the board. So like their Sisu sometimes doesn't
interesting.
trigger Flynn. It's a hard person to kind of get over. You have to put
For those of
damage on them.
you unfamiliar, Lawrence is a draft Jaff card, a 3 cost from set 2 and steel, normally an 0-4 that taps for 2, but says while this character has no damage, he gets +4 power. So he will be a 4-4. This was awesome in limited. I love this card in limited when we did our set 2 pre-release and stuff like that, but has this is the first I've seen of
Yep.
him in an actual competitive setting.
Yeah, I saw him. I saw him maybe in the first set championship that you guys couldn't go to when I went to Sarasota. There was a couple people playing him in the steel list, and it was specifically for that. He said he's a 4-4. So if their Sisu comes down, I don't have cards in my hand or enough cards because I've been singing stuff and things like that, then their Sisu's smaller than it. And I can just tap freely because if it doesn't have damage on it, it's killing whatever runs into it, or it's banishing whatever runs into it. So definitely a decent card kind of making his way. We've also seen, oh, and I can't think of the name of them, but there's a bodyguard that's like an X5 in steel that is also showing up in some of these decks. It's like a 1 or 2 um, of because specifically for like the Sisu Flynn combos and things.
I'm just happy to see Baloo.
Yeah, yeah.
I love Baloo.
There's a lot of interesting ones, and again, I think that when we think back of set 1 and 2, you really always had Ruby Amethyst and Steel Song. Like those are your two main decks. Yes, you still had like Blue Steel and a few random decks kind of fighting for that top slot, but those are really the top 2 decks. Set 3, Steel Song kind of started to disappear, and set 4, like we really haven't seen it this whole time up until the last week or so. Then we've started to see more people shift back to that, to fight the Bucky decks, right? Because they can get the turn 2 queen into a grab your swords or something crazy like that to really take down the board. So it was fun seeing that deck back up kind of on top. Again, being in the finals and having 2 in top 4 is always a really good thing. But of course, tons and tons of Bucky. was at Texas. So,
but moving forward,
yeah,
that may not be the case.
yeah. So what do we think? So Bucky, again, like we mentioned, this upcoming weekend's kind of the last weekend you're going to be able to use Bucky as he is. Again, it's not a banned card, so technically you can still use him as a 3-drop with no ward that only triggers when people shift. So again, most people won't use them. But what do you think is going to really change as we're starting to look at the next set? Do you think that losing Bucky is a good thing, or should he still be here?
I think it's a good thing because like overall, like in Orlando, it seems like everyone relied on it because they knew they were gonna win. But this last set championship, it seemed like it was wide open. Like everyone was willing to play other stuff and not just play Bucky. So I think it opens up like more creativity, more like decks to be played than just one or trying to counter the one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. It's just, I mean, as much as I don't like Diablo as far as his design goes, at the very least, Diablo is a bit more fun or interesting in the sense that, like, if you make a Bucky list, it's going to be pretty much the same because the majority of your Floodborns that you want to play are going to be in that green steel combo, right? That's like where the best cards are. Diablo, like we saw with the Sing Together Lemon Lime version of the deck. I talk about Bucky, or I'm talking about Diablo being in the aggro deck that we were showing as far as like spicy decks go, would be cool. So Diablo has a lot of plug and play in other decks. So I'd rather see more decks featuring a card I think is broken than a singular deck that is far more oppressive and annoying, especially for newer players. Discarding your hand is never fun. Continue to shine. So I think Bucky being gone is going to be probably, I would say, the best thing to happen to Arcana so far. And I would be shocked if anything surpasses it in the next year or two.
Yeah. And, the biggest thing when it comes to Bucky, and I would agree with you on that. I still am in the camp of, you would have taken ward off of Bucky, I think it would have been fine. Then you could have just literally killed him with any spell that you probably already had. But
well, can I play devil's advocate real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's imagine a world where Ravensburger does that, and they say, "Hey, we're doing an emergency errata to Bucky. We're just removing ward." Okay.
Yeah.
And then next DLC, you still have 15 Buckies in top 32.
Yeah.
You still have that many. It's still that good. What are they going to do now? Are they going to say, let's try another errata?
I think that's the ban after that.
Yeah, but okay, but how does that look as far as optics go, right?
Yeah.
We tried an errata, we messed up. Now we have to ban it with our tails between our legs and admit we were wrong. You can't do that as a company, and you can't do that as someone that's supposed to be able to balance your game. You lose trust from your players. I think they had to, unfortunately, as much as you and I both disagree with the way they went about it, they had to be extremely heavy-handed with their approach. They should have just banned it, but they had to just kill the card in that sense.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough one because, to your point, with this errata, they are going to eventually release some printed versions of this new errata card. So I could see them being like, hey, we're going to remove ward, and then something else that still is powerful or whatever. And then you're like, okay, well, if we touch it again, now we got to send more physical cards out, or we've got to ban it. I mean, we've seen that in Magic a couple times with cards where like it is really strong and we have to ban or unban cards along the way. Yeah, erratas are always tough. I mean, coming from Snap, we've seen cards get touched 4 or 5 different times. And it'd be a big deal. But I don't know. I think the ward is what makes it so tough because like all of these decks have some pretty easy answers to Bucky, like Brawl, like any of the steel removal, and even into blue, like if you get to like Let It Go or whatever. But like right now with a ward, it protects them on that. But I did want to bring up one card as we're transitioning into Shimmering Skies, the new cards coming, all the spoilers we've been seeing. and they spoiled a card yesterday that I'm wondering if they would have spoiled like 2 weeks ago, if it would have settled people down a little bit with Bucky. And I know me and you, Brad, we talked about this a little bit, but Magicka essentially stops Bucky. So it says during your opponent's turn, if an effect would cause you to discard one or more cards from your hand, you don't discard. So it is a 4-drop. It's inkable. It's a 2/5. Again, it's 4, so it's not going to come down, super early. Bucky's still going to hit you with at least 1 or 2 discards before she comes down if they have their really good hand. But it does stop you from then on, as long as she stays on the field, from discarding cards. And I wanted to kind of throw this one up as we start to talk about spoilers in the set. Do you think if we would have saw this 2 weeks ago, it could have calmed some of the Bucky complaining? Or do you think they maybe even waited to spoil this one to make sure that the errata of they took care of it first so people weren't like, oh, wait, you don't have to errata, we've got this card?
No. That's short and sweet. I think no. I think this card is not good enough to stop Bucky. Yeah, it's good in the mid to mid game where your opponent can just have a couple of Buckies hit the board and they can do that single turn where they go Bucky, shift beast, and you're like, all right, I just lost the 2 cards I was holding in my hand. She can stop those instances. But as far as the early game, like you just said, you're still going to discard a couple of cards. By the time she comes down, decent body at 2/5, tough to deal with that deck. But I don't think it's good enough for that. This should have been, in my opinion, if you wanted to keep it in a world that had Bucky, she should have been a 2/2 for 2. Should have been a hate bear, which we'll talk about a hate bear in a little bit. But yeah, she should have been a hate bear.
Yeah. How about you, Prashant?
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's too late, especially if you're a newer player too. The Bucky stuff just comes at you too fast, and then if you're discarding cards, you might not even be able to play this on 4 when you want to. So it's all right, I have this card and I still can't do anything with this card. I think it's too little too late. So, but I think overall with Diablo and stuff, I think it might be good against that. But Bucky, I think it's too strong.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do kind of agree with you, Brad, on the fact of this probably should have been a 3-drop, maybe a 2-drop, to get it out
Definitely
a little bit earlier. To help with the Bucky situation. So yeah, we'll have to see, as she comes out, is she going to be used? Because we were kind of discussing this. There's other cards that this is still going to be a decent card for. So again, when you look at Ruby Amethyst, one of the big things that you don't want to see is a whole new world. You've got your cards, you've got your be prepared, you're good to go where you are, and then all of a sudden they hit you with the sudden chill. They hit you with a Ursula to steal the be prepared. They hit you with a whole new world to discard the hand and draw, and this is gonna stop those cards from going off.
So I want to double check something real quick. I'm curious on the ruling. I'm pulling up Steel Song right now because I want to see the actual wording of a whole new world. Does this fizzle it completely?
You would draw. You don't discard, though.
Each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. So because it's discards their hand and draw 7 cards, it's not a cost. Okay, so you would just draw 7.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I was wondering if I couldn't remember if the wording was each player discards, period, or semicolon.
Yeah.
And then draw 7, which would suggest the discard as a cost, which means this has to happen before this happens. And that would just make it so that, it fizzles the card. But no, that's cool. I still think it's a little slow.
Yeah.
Even for that, because again, you have Ariel, who's a singer 5 on 3. You have the Queen, you can drop on 2 and immediately sing a whole new world. So if you're going against someone that's casting a whole new world fairly, which I don't think that deck exists in all honesty, she's great.
I mean, like blue steel, like yes, blue steel can get it off earlier when they're ramping, but I feel
Right.
like blue steel that has, because again, there's two versions, one with wheel, one without. The one with wheel plays it pretty fair on turn 5 or 6, typically, just to
Okay.
refill their hand.
I just think she's a little bit too conservatively costed. I think she should have been at the minimum of 3 cost. Like this just I'm thinking in terms of Magic, this feels like a 3 cost enchantment,
Yeah,
right? Kind of thing.
yeah.
I greedily want this to be a 2 cost. Every time I point at myself, I'm sorry, the stupid iPhone. I would want this to be a 2 cost, but
Yeah.
it's fine. I would love to be proven wrong that this card ends up being a great portion of the meta or ends up working out. But I think for the most part, this is not going to be relevant for this foreseeable future.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a slightly different perspective on it. I think it'll be a 2 of in a lot of decks because it's inkable. I think we're starting to get into the world of quote unquote sideboards inside your deck. I still think it's going to take another set or two to make that be a real big thing. But we are seeing people understanding. Like I'll give Ursula, the 2-drop Ursula is a good example of this, right? There's a lot of decks now that don't run songs, period.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that with your red green aggro deck, the Mufasa deck that's out there, and things like that. And once you know that's your matchup, you literally just instantly know these are inkable cards. Every time I go, this is an ink, easy ink. And I think that that's what this card maybe becomes, not a 4 of, but a 2 of, where if you're playing against Emerald specifically, right? You know, they have like Sudden Chill or they have that 2-drop Ursula, and you're in that kind of control purple, then you want to make sure when you're mulliganing, you mulligan away those be prepared. But they usually are going to use that Ursula on turn 4, turn 5 to catch the be prepared before you use it. Because it doesn't hit Brawl, it doesn't hit some of the other ones, but it does hit be prepared. So I think that this could be a card that shows up as a 2 of, and it also makes them have to now go, okay, maybe I have to use my Ursula earlier and throw her out on 2 rather than playing something better on 2, depending on what that deck ends up looking like.
I can see it.
Yeah, so again, I don't think it's a 4 of. I agree with you. I think it's a little too slow for Bucky. I would have loved for it to be a 3-drop. I think if it was, again, a 2-drop would have been perfect for Bucky. A 3-drop, I feel like would have been a little bit better, but maybe, I don't know, maybe that makes it more susceptible for getting removed because as a 3-drop, maybe it has to be a 2/3, and now you're opening it back up to a lot of like steals removal and stuff like
It
that.
already dies to Brawl.
It does, which I think
and
is
Medusa.
fine. Yeah. So, but it doesn't die to most of the steel cards, which is kind of the give and take there. So as we go from Magicka just into set 5, so we're talking about Shimmering Skies. We're going to be going through some of our favorites, but before we start pulling those up, just overall, how are you guys feeling about the set? What we've seen a lot of new properties coming into this one. So we had Wreck-It Ralph. Again, we had the one Wreck-It Ralph card before. Pick a Fight. I don't count it. But we have a lot of Wreck-It Ralph coming in. And we have Brother Bear spoiled over the weekend. Prashant, I'll start with you. Just, overall, how you feel about Shimmering Skies? Is it exciting? And is any of these properties or cards, just characters in general, looking good?
I think overall as a set, like whenever you have a new set, like you're excited for like new cards and combos and new metas. So it's always exciting for a new set. So I think like overall, I think some of the stuff that's been like leaked or the cards that we're talking about are gonna be like game changers, and then like I'm probably gonna ditch brooms after this next set and go back to like red blue just based off of like the cool cards we're seeing.
Yeah. How about you, Brad? You excited about the set overall?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it right now. I'm scrolling through the spoilers so far, and I think it looks really interesting, really cool. There's some cards that like I'm seeing like some commons, and I'm like, hey, this common actually looks like it could be playable. And that's always a fun thing to see.
Yeah. So speaking of those cards, Prashant, you mentioned blue, going back to red, blue, and things like that. One of your favorite cards we had to add on the list because it's the most, or at least in my opinion, is one of the most talked about cards. One of the cards that everybody, including myself, is saying is going to be fairly broken in this set, and it's Mufasa. And so if you guys haven't seen Mufasa, it's an 8-drop, non-inkable. He's a 4/9, so he can't be hit by Medusa. He taps for 4 lore, and he's legendary. Now, the thing that makes him crazy is when you play this character, you can you exert all your ink, but then you return 2 cards randomly back to your hand. So this is the first card we have in Lorcana where ink is coming out of your inkwell back to your hand, and you can potentially use them. And then whenever you quest with this character, you can ready all the cards in your inkwell. So again, you'll probably have to wait for that additional turn for it to come back around to use that. But Prashant, why did you pick this card? What do you want to do with it? Because again, so many things here.
So I think with like Lucky Dime, I think Lucky Dime stocks are gonna go high, especially with Mufasa's. This is definitely a card that's like a finisher, especially with blue with all the ramp. You could get a
Yeah.
bunch of ink on the board fast. So this Mufasa will come before you know it. You could probably get this out maybe like a turn like 5. Mufasa could be out and you could just do Mufasa things. And the fact that you could bring 2 random cards back into your hand, especially when you have like cards like One Jump Ahead and
Yeah.
stuff like that, where you don't even know what you're inking, and then all of a sudden like you get like a surprise card in your hand. That's insane. And especially readying your like re-readying your ink as well.
Yeah.
I don't like, can you can replay it, right? You could re-tap it after, right?
Yeah. So essentially, what you'll do is you'll be able to play whatever you want. Now, I will caveat this because coming from Magic, you would do what they call floating your mana, where you like tap your mana, they go into your mana pool, then you can untap stuff and retap it to add more to your mana pool. That is not a thing in Lorcana. So once you tap your ink, you need to use it. There isn't like an ink well that just kind of holds it. But to your point, like you mentioned, Dime, you could tap your ink to play Dime, quest with Mufasa, that all untaps, and now you can use that to either play something or trigger, your Dime's ability with Mufasa on board. I mean, your Dime's tapping for 4 again, so that's 8 lore with 2 cards in one turn.
Yeah. And the fact that it's a 4/9 too is going to be hard to take down.
Absolutely. So Brad, with Mufasa, I mean, you're on the same page. Is this gonna break Lorcana? Is this the panic button we need to be hidden?
No, he's 8. He's the same cost as your Tamatoa's. Goes in the same kind of deck. Could be the same exact deck, especially because you're running Lucky Dime and stuff. Maybe it's like a 2 of kind of thing. But he's an 8 cost. He's a big boy. He's gonna go crazy with Lucky Dime. But like, think about it. Tamatoa has a higher ceiling with Lucky Dime than this one does. This one has a better floor, and it doesn't really do anything on entry because on entry, if you have any extra ink, it exerts it, and then you pick up 2 at random, right? A lot of times when we're inking in this game, you're inking stuff that's not really relevant at the moment. Like you mentioned Ursula Deceiver, right? No one's right now in the meta, not enough people are playing songs unless I'm going against Steel Song. That's why I'm keeping her in the deck. But for the most part, I'm just going to be inking her. And I just picked up the Ursula again. Yeah, I guess I can ink her again next turn, but it's not really great to be picking up stuff like that anyway. So really, his ETB is bad for you for the most part. Whereas then he has to stick around for a full another turn. Now, we'll see what removal we get in this set beyond what's been spoiled, even though we've got a good amount. I know we have the Scar that banishes a Mufasa.
Yeah.
That's a meme. That's not going to be ran. You could bring back Dragon's Fire. The awkward thing about him being a 4 power is that he dodges Medusa and stuff like that, but then also dodges the greatest criminal mind, which is 5 or more. So there's a little awkwardness of how you remove him, but as we've said before, it's a Diacid Doomblade situation coming from Magic. He has to stick around for a full turn to do something. So yeah, I'm not too worried about him. I think he's going to be good as a finisher, but he's not going to be like, oh my god, we need to ban this or it's broken.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Just how fast you can get him out, like you're mentioning. When he comes out, like on that particular turn, is the other deck equipped to take them out? So again, you mentioned Medusa. You can always ice block Medusa, which is what everybody's gonna say in the comments, right? But it's definitely one of those where there are some removal spells. Maybe this brings back Dragon's Fire. We just got another removal spell spoiled earlier today where you can sacrifice one of your characters and you banish one of theirs. So there we are getting some additional removal in there. But if you're having to do it the old-fashioned way, a 4/9 body, very hard to deal with. We've already talked about locations being 8, health being hard to deal with, and now we've got 9
what
here.
What about that Cogsworth?
Yeah, putting resist on him would make it even worse. So yeah, so a lot of cool stuff within Mufasa, and I'm gonna kind of keep us in the blue train because I do think what we've seen so far in blue is very strong. But I wanted to go with Chicha, the dedicated mother. So she's a 2-drop, non-inkable, 2/1, so she can get removed pretty easily there with her toughness. But during your turn, when you put a card into your inkwell, if it's the second card you put in your inkwell this turn, you may draw a card. So I don't think that this is going to be an insane, like, going to break the format type of card. But this is really good when you play her on 2, you play Quill on 3, then you're going to ink something with Quill. So as long as you have a Quill out, you're literally drawing an extra card every turn because you're going to grab that extra card and you should have something you could ink each turn on your Quill. So your main ink plus your Quill. Now that doesn't always fire. There may be something, you may have a bunch of uninkables and you can't do your normal ink plus your Quill ink. But I think that this is a really cool card when it comes to ramp because it does potentially give you repeatable ramp as you're going through. With that repeatable, you're drawing cards. So you're getting another chance to potentially do it. And again, this could fire off of 1 jumps, how far I'll go. Like if you think about all the ramp cards, each of those could draw you an extra card off of this card. So again, can be removed. A Tinkerbell takes it out. Any of the steel removal that's out there, Brawl and Ruby. So that's why I'm saying I don't think it's broken in that sense. But to your point, Prashant, you throw it in there with Cogsworth, and now steals can be harder to remove this thing. But I really like this card just in the fact that like drawing cards is key when it comes to Lorcana, and this is another one of those just blue doing its blue stuff and getting some cards along with it. All right, so I'm gonna throw it over to Brad, and Brad, you had Ice Palace, which I think was spoiled today or yesterday.
I believe it was today. But regardless, this is such a cool card. It is the first ETB or enters the battlefield or when it enters play effect on a location that we've gotten, which is really sweet. It's uninkable. It comes in with 4 toughness on a location, which isn't a whole lot for 3. But it has a very powerful effect. When you play this location, choose an exerted character while this location is in play. That character can't ready at the start of their turn. So this is a prison, which is flavorful because it's Elsa's Ice Palace. It's a solitude thing of like her own prison, all that good stuff, whatever. Really awesome flavor. Cool card. I love prison effects. I think they're super fun. For me, not for my opponents, but you know what? That's unfortunate for you. But again, the caveat here is the fact that it only has 4 toughness. for a location, so it's not super difficult to deal with. And yeah, this with the wall
Mhm.
to make it so that they can't challenge your locations, I'm thinking maybe an amethyst steel type of like prisony deck could be a thing. Hey, also by the way, if people keep playing Smee next season, you know what this does to Smee? He dies. You keep putting that damage on you, buddy. You stay
And not getting
exerted.
the two lore.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I think this card's awesome. I'm really excited to kind of brew with this.
Yeah, I like I like this card in the fact that yes, 4 defense means it can be removed pretty easily. But I think it needed to be like I couldn't imagine if this thing was like 7, right? So then like a
Right.
Maui couldn't unlock your character essentially. Because the other thing to keep in mind, like by keeping them exerted means they're open to be attacked. So maybe this is one of those where you just want to keep their potential card tapped so that you can remove it with some of your other characters on a future turn or something like that. But then also, they're kind of having to waste a turn to remove this in order to unlock their card.
And this does still gain you a lore. Like the fact that
Mhm.
this is also still a one lore turn location, it's also pretty cool.
We've seen these effects in the past. So like Elsa from set 1 was super powerful when you were playing her late game to be like, oh no, those two characters you like, no, they're not
But here's the
untapping for
thing:
2 turns.
that's just a limited amount of
Right,
clock, right?
right,
Like this just says they can't untap during their turn.
right.
Period. So as long as Elsa's Ice Palace is in play, you've locked out one of their characters.
Now, I will say, just for everybody to be aware, it does say ready at the start of their turn. So you can get around this with like LeFou and some of the other
Yeah,
cards. But if you were to untap it with LeFou and then tap it down to like gain lore, it won't untap. It
because it's
still is
still
under,
a target.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but wanted to throw that out there just in case like you're thinking of red or you're thinking of whatever. There are some cards that can untap your characters and that will allow them to untap. So even like the princesses with Moana or some of the other cards, it will untap. Just keep in mind at the start of your turn, if they are exerted and they've been targeted by this card, they won't untap. So kind of moving from there, back over to Prashan. Prashan has a fun one, and he cheated a little bit. I told him, I said, give me one card or 2 cards that you like. Gave me 1 card, and then he gave me 8 cards.
Yeah, yeah.
And you had
I know we
Snow
talked
White and all the
like
dwarves.
like characters and all that, but I think it's pretty cool how like the dwarves sort of synergize with Snow White,
Hmm.
and the fact that like Snow White, what is she a like princess knight,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool, and I don't know like like 3 lore, a 5 3 lore. Only thing that sucks is like she's uninkable, but
Hmm.
it's totally fine. And I think like it's Grumpy. I think Grumpy might be like the standout.
Hmm.
I think like while one of your knight characters is at a location, this character gains resist +2,
Hmm.
and then like the burst of speed during your turn, this character gains evasive. I think that's gonna be pretty cool as far as like dwarves. I think that might be the best dwarf.
Hmm.
I don't know if you guys see something different, but yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I
Yeah.
don't know if anyone will play this or try
Well,
like a Snow White and the Seven Dwarves deck, but it's an awesome concept.
yeah, and I think if you put it in amber, right, we have the other Snow White and Amber dwarves from set 2. So you do have the one Snow White that makes all your dwarves cost 1 less. So that one could be pretty big. And again, you can stack that. So you could have like 2 of those Snow Whites, and now you're going to get some free dwarves onto the battlefield. We definitely have some good ones from that set because the set 2 also gives your other dwarf stuff. That's like if this is here, then your other dwarves get X or Y. So I think we're getting close. So just like brooms, this is a big step in the right direction for this tribal or kindred or whatever you want to use as far as the term. But I think, it may take like one more set of dwarves to make like a really solid deck, but I think there's something here with steel Amber.
I'm going to be the bearer of bad news.
Yeah.
First thing I noticed was Snow White is yet another 5-cost steel card that's a 3/5 that dies to Medusa. Can we stop making our steel 5 drops 3 power or less? Second, looking at all of the dwarves themselves, there's one that stands out to me, but he's not standing out to me because he's going to be good in a Snow White deck. I think he's just going to be a card that's straight up competitively playable in the right shell if we figure out the best home for him, and it's Doc. 2-cost uninkable 1/3. When you play this character, discard your hand to draw 2 cards.
Yeah.
Now, that seems like a crazy cost, right? To go turn 2, dump your hand, draw a couple. It's like a -4, -3 at the very least. But give it time. This will eventually be a card that's like potentially bannable, because once we get stuff that we already have some graveyard interaction, right?
Yeah,
Or discard
Chernobog.
pile interaction
Yeah.
to kind of bring stuff back. But just wait until we get more graveyard interaction and more cards that start to say when this hits the graveyard does a thing.
Yeah.
So this is a card to look out for. If this card is like 20 cents, which he should be as a rare, I would pick up like 5 playsets.
Yeah.
For me, personally, I think this is going to be a broken card someday. Maybe not in a year, but someday.
Yeah, I mean, we have like cards like Chernobog already that just says like, hey, it's going to be super cheap depending on how many creatures you have in your graveyard or your discard pile. So like realistically, you could play them to do that. Where Brad's coming from is like in Magic, we have a lot of cards that interact with like reviving stuff straight to the battlefield from your graveyard. So again, from your discard going straight to the battlefield. You've got things that say like, hey, if something came from your discard to your hand or from your discard to the battlefield, XYZ, like pull these back into the field, like Dredge.
This card would be so broken in Magic. Looking at it, I'm just thinking of like just prized amalgam shenanigans, creeping chill. No, creeping chill has to go from your deck. Anyway, I shouldn't. Yeah, whatever. It's just so fun.
And the other thing to think about though, like I do agree with you, even without the cards today, you could play this when you don't have a hand and you draw 2 cards. Yeah. So I'm not saying that's like the perfect use for him or anything like that, but it is something where he's not a bad top deck on turn 9, right? Like when you're going through and you're like, oh, what am I going to draw? Like he's not the worst top deck because you play him and you draw 2 cards. So he does have some value even into the mid and late game. And maybe, he's not a early game, play, but definitely could see some cool stuff coming in. Anything else, Prashan, from your dwarves? Anything in your mind that you're, again, I know you're going red blue, so these are not in your colors, but
I just think I think this would be fun.
Yeah.
I would probably lose badly, but I think it's fun.
Always fun to go with the fun cards. Which, talking of fun and cards, and I think me and Brad are kind of on the same page here. I'm going to do mine first, but I'm going with the Sword Released because we've been talking, and here on the InkCast, we're going to be doing something soon with this idea, but playing Magic, playing Commander, playing multiplayer, whether it's 2-headed giant, 4-person free-for-alls, whatever the game mode may be, I really enjoy multiplayer. And I think that when it comes to Lorcana, we just have to figure out what that format is, what the rules are, and hopefully soon we're going to have some stuff coming out about that. But this card 100% gets slotted into those decks if you're playing Ruby, because this is the Sword Released. It's a 3-drop. It's uninkable. But at the start of your turn, if you have a character in play with more attack than each opposing character in play, each opponent loses 1 lore and you gain lore equal to that lore lost. So essentially, this is a Flynn that's on the field, but this is an item. It's like Flynn, to where at the start of the turn, if I have the biggest creature, I gain 3 lore. everybody else loses 1 lore. This is going to be really powerful in those multiplayer style games because you play something big on turn 2, you play this on turn 3. When it comes back to your turn, you're gaining free lore and everybody else is losing lore. And I'm thinking, again, this will be one of those cards that's going to be dirt cheap, most likely. But once we start to find these multiplayer formats, this will be a card. This will be a staple, and it'll shoot up in value once something kicks off. And I think that Lorcana is looking at a multiplayer format, something, because of some of the cards we're seeing, like this one that's specifically saying each of your opponents. And we've already had that even at set 1, but we're seeing it a little bit more often.
Yeah, I think they're future proofing themselves. I'm sure they have some ideas for it to do an official one at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to be anytime soon that
Right.
they'll announce anything like that, but they definitely plan to do something because, like you said, as early as set 1, they've had that wording. So they're like just future proofing all their cards to just be like, yeah, for when that happens, we're ready.
Absolutely. So Prashant, just real quick, when you were playing Magic and things like that, did you ever get into kind of the multiplayer world or just more of the single player stuff?
It was like a few times back in the day, yeah. Like we would play like multiplayer games or like was it like Two-Headed Monster or something?
Two-Headed
Like
Giant, yeah.
Or Two-Headed Dragon. Like back in the day, we would do stuff like that. I forgot. It's been a while since I played Magic.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Two-Headed Giant was like one of the big multiplayer formats where you share life 2 versus 2 as you're going through. And so kind of going from that, and I think this is where me and Brad were on the same page here, because this was one of the cards that was kind of on my list of like maybe one of the ones I wanted to talk about. But you put it on yours, which was Coda. So again, Brother Bear coming into Lorcana, and this is the one you picked.
Yeah, so he's in Amber, a 2/1 for 2 inkable, quest for 2, and says during opponent's turns, you cannot lose lore. This is a literal hate bear. And for those of you that are confused when I'm saying that, back in the old days of Magic, like in the 90s, one of the original cards was literally just called Bear, and it was a 2/2 for 2. Now, this is not a 2/2, it's a 2/1, but Ravensburger knows what they're doing. So calling it a hate bear is accurate because a hate bear is basically saying it's a 2/2 for 2 that does something to counter some type of specific play style. In this case, countering cards like Aladdin from set 1, the 3 cost that comes in, drains you for 1, things like that. That is the easiest effect to have in the game. It's been there since set 1. It's going to be one that's always going to exist. We have it in this set exactly, just like the one you just shown for multiplayer. So, yeah, this is going to be a really cool card to have against those strategies. It's the epitome of what should be a sideboard card, but the saving grace is that it's a 2 cost and it taps for 2 on top of it. So it is something that can be a little bit more aggressively slanted. Maybe you run some bodyguard stuff with him, like Simba, Baloo, things like that, just to ensure that, hey, I don't want you to be able to use your effects to drain my lore, but I want to be aggressive with it, so I'm going to protect it, kind of have it stick around for a little bit. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing. But yeah, this card's awesome. I'm happy to see it in the game, and it's just making me happy seeing more and more recognizable type of an effect or type of effects come to the game coming from Magic. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, and this is definitely one of those that when we talk about, like, I don't know if it'll be a card in the current set and the current format of what Lorcana is, if it'll have a value to it, but give it a couple weeks, let the price come down from wherever it is, and again, if it's 20 cents, 50 cents, whatever, wherever it kind of falls into, this is one of those cards you probably want to go ahead and pick up your play sets of, because it will be a staple whenever this multiplayer format comes out. Because right now, if I was playing multiplayer, Ruby has to be the color I'm playing because of, you mentioned it, the 3-drop Aladdin that drains everybody for 1, so it's going to drain each person. The big 5 cost shift Aladdin says every time you banish a character, you -2 lore on them. Maybe you go with the big Ursula that's in Amethyst. When she comes down, she drains 1 lore. There's a lot of cards out there that do that to all opponents. And so this card's going to be just a great card to be like, hey, I'm going to play it. To your point, if you're in that kind of situation and you don't need it, it's inkable. You can play it, you can tap it for 2 lore, let it go, or put some bodyguard to kind of help it out. So all in all, I think the stats are great on the card. And it will be a staple in multiplayer. Don't know if it'll be a staple in current format, because I would definitely play a Piglet over this card. But it's definitely a good looking card. So speaking of kind of the cards we're looking at and wanting to pick up and things like that, we've got the release coming. So we've got another week or 2 coming through on the 9th. So we technically have like 2.5 weeks, something like that, until the new set comes out. But we'll be out in Disney Springs picking up the set, because we've got a lot of awesome stuff coming. And one of those is the D23 set. So I want to talk about that a little bit and get your guys' thoughts on this, because originally other D23 set from 2 years ago is worth a whole bunch of money, because nobody knew what Lorcana was. A lot of people threw them away when they were getting handed out these promos, and they were hard to find. But this time around, it is going to be at D23, but it's also going to be at multiple shops. So if I pull that up just real quick, we've got of course, D23. We've got in the United States, we've got Walt Disney World, we got Disneyland, we got the Disney Store in Times Square, we got the United Kingdom at the Disney Store London, Ireland, the Disney Store Dublin, France, Disneyland Paris, Australia, the Disney Pop-Up Experience, Melbourne, D23 collection available. So again, we're going to see this in a lot of different places if you're in those locations. But what are you guys thinking about the D23 set? Do you like how they did it? Hard art, all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it looks awesome. I'm gonna get it, or try to get it.
What you
like it?
Well, my only worry about it is, will this sit?
Will it what?
Will it sit? Do you think it'll sit
Like for display?
or sell out?
Oh, will it stay on the shelves rather than just sell out? I don't know. I think it's gonna sell out because it's gonna be scalped, I think, is the problem. So when we look at the D100 sets, right? The D100 sets sold out really quickly, but then they just kept coming. And I think the difference there was you could find it outside of the Disneyland resorts. You could find it at Target. Very rare you would find it there, but it could be at some of the big box stores. Whereas this one is only going to be at the Disney stores. And considering everybody in the US is going to want this, that can't get to D23 or can't get to one of the 3 places in the US, I think this is going to be a scalper's dream of picking up 2 or going back through the store and picking up 4 and then immediately going to eBay and resell. This thing is $100, but reselling it for $300 or even $500 potentially to some of those people that just have to complete their collection.
And do you think, I don't know, would someone crack this and just sell cards individually? I'm pretty sure that's going to happen too.
Yeah, they lose their value instantly though. This feels like a thing that's going to sell better as a whole piece rather than the individual cards, I feel like.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's correct. I think if it's sealed, you're going to get a bigger value, but I could see somebody being like, I just want to open this for the Oswalds or whatever, right? And be like, I don't care about these other ones. And they could be selling them individually. Maybe people opening because they want to actually use the 2-drop Ursula in their Bucky deck or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, I think you're going to get way more if you keep it sealed for sure.
Yeah, so we definitely have to show up to Disney Springs earlier that day then.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have to be
before
like
they open.
normally they were there like an hour early. I think we're gonna have to be like a couple hours early.
Oh, you know what
this
you
time
guys can
around.
do? You can go early enough to where you can go to one of the many Disney hotels and
Mhm.
just go get your free continental breakfast,
Yeah.
and then go.
True.
Which is a great thing. I mean, seriously, who's gonna stop you? No one ever. No one ever stops and questions random people getting breakfast at a hotel. You just
Yeah.
assume they're
Well,
there
it
staying.
depends. It depends what hotel you're at, but yeah,
Yeah,
like
he's like
Oh
the
yeah,
last time, like 4th of July weekend, it was like
dude,
almost like $50
chill.
a meal, which sucked
yeah.
for
So
like old Mickey waffles.
You make those yourself.
No, they
that
have them ready
yeah,
for you
it
That's
depends.
disgusting.
It
That's
depends. It
disgusting,
depends.
dude.
Depends where you're at on there. But again, one of the biggest things here, guys, is this set is going to be limited to only those places. It says while supplies last. We don't know. It is limited to per person, but that's pretty much all the product there. We don't know how many are actually going to be there. Like, I'm really afraid that we're going to get there and they're like, sorry, we only have 100 of these, or whatever. And that could be a problem when it comes to these things. It could be a lot more. Considering Troves sold out day one this last set at Disney Springs, there is a chance when you were asking, like, will these sit on shelves? I don't think they will. I think we're going to see more people trying or doing the double line thing where they walk through once and then they go stuff their bags in their car and then they walk through again if there's that many that are there, because this is 100% going to be because it's not in the big box stores, it will be resold like crazy. And again, here at the Inkcast, we do not endorse you doing that, since it's limit 2 per person. Let people get what they want.
Yeah, please
Let the
don't.
other people get in the line. But I'm just saying, like, we know that there's people that do that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, going back real quick before I look at the card, the D100s, kind of going back to that train of thought. They disappeared for a while, and then for some reason they showed back up at Disney Springs like
They're
a month
still there.
ago. Yeah. So
I was
so
just there.
I don't think that this is going to be the same as that. I think that's an overprinting. That is like one of the only places to find them. But even with those, people are picking those up and then like reselling them for like 3 times the value. But if we look at one of the cards, I'm going to pull up Oswald for a second because I just want to touch on this for a minute as we're kind of wrapping up this episode. But one, I want to point out that the reason why these cards are going to be sought after are, it is a different art style. It's a borderless card, so the art goes all the way out to the sides. It's not enchanted, so it doesn't have that same foiling effect as an enchanted, but it is the full art. And specifically, I'm in love with the Oswald art. We'll talk about his ability or whatever, but like just the fact that like this brings you back to that like old school black and white artwork. And again, Oswald being kind of Walt's very first animated characters. I'm so glad that they were able to get this character into Lorcana.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see this. But it's interesting to see like another card spoiled for another set that you can't even play for a whole like set,
Yeah,
which is pretty
3 months.
interesting. So it's like, all right, like I have this card, but I can't even play it. So it's more like a collector's item. I feel like it's more of a collector's item than you cracking it open. But
Yeah.
then like like Ravensburger said, like they have the next few sets already planned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's how it always is.
Yeah. Usually with a TCG, they're always like 3 sets, 4 sets. That they're like 4 sets ahead of what their final designs and printing, what you're seeing, and then they've already got like on paper all the way out to like set 9 or 10 at this point, of like, this is where the story's going, this is what's going on, and it gives them a few months of run room to be like, oh my gosh, this card's a problem or this combo's a problem. Let me design a card to help with that. But you do have to remember that's like 3 sets from now. So like with the Bucky issue, like now that they were seeing the issue with Bucky, it isn't like they could have been like, all right, set 5, let's go get the anti-Bucky card and throw it in here.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, overall, this card itself is going to be super busted. So I'm sure we'll be talking about this when the next set comes out with blue. But I am excited to see, you know, pre-release, what's going on, what we're going to be able to pick up, what we're going to be opening. We'll have some opening videos and things like that as we get our products. Yeah, and I'm super excited about that. So as we wrap up, it's been a longer episode than normal, but that's totally fine because it's always fun hanging out. Any last thoughts from you guys just about everything we talked about, or anything you know, we need to talk about in the next week or so?
I'm just looking forward to the next set championships. I think like I probably want to grind more and get more games in to prepare.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would help out a lot. And I think that would help out players out there as well. Because while I was watching the tournament in Dallas, I just saw in chat like everyone asking what should they play,
Yeah.
or like how they're like combing through YouTube on figuring out how to play certain decks.
Yep.
And of course, you saw the yucky Buckies in chat too. But yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. That's you, Brad.
I'm in the same boat. I mean, it feels like set 5 and that, you know, season is looking to be like the first, like, I don't know. It's almost feels like it's going to be like the first true competitive environment with a problem card like Bucky seemingly gone from the format. And then you have, because like you look at set 1, it was basically playing, you know, set 1 constructed.
Yeah.
Right. Then you have set 2 came out and had the bounce stuff, so you just had purple everywhere with the bounce package. Set 3 had locations and the Ursula thing, so you really had the discard deck with or without Bucky, really showcasing how good it is. Then, of course, the most recent set had Diablo, which is what made people want to play Bucky even more in the first place, because it's a 3-drop Floodborn that's really, 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 really good. There's always been like that deck. You're like, ooh, I don't feel great about playing against that deck this format. Where the next format, I think there's going to be enough stuff, enough spread of viable ideas.
Yep.
Where, you know, I think this might be like the most wide open meta we've had yet.
Yeah, I can agree. I mean, again, I'm going to cross my fingers that just blue doesn't just end up being the color that just everybody's playing and is the best out there. Because I still think blue-red may have the advantage right now, but we still only have about half the set spoiled. So over the next week, we're going to get way more spoilers coming out. We'll be filling all those slots, and maybe we'll see, you know, some additional cards for green or amber or whatever to kind of take them over the top. So I'm excited to see that this going on. So if you're watching this over on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button on this channel, because we're over on the podcast channel. And again, check the main channel for more content. We got a lot of videos coming out. We're going to be doing more gameplay, deck tech, things like that as we play, you know, over cameras on Discord and things like that. And if there's anything you guys want us to talk about, like, hey, this is something I want to know more information on or whatever, let us know down below. We'll make sure to work it into one of the upcoming podcasts because, again, this is a conversation not just between us, but also you guys. Appreciate you. And until next time, I'll take it easy.